Hello, welcome to this week's economy. I'm Dr. Vance Ginn. Today is April 27th, 2023. Thank you for joining me. We've got some big things to talk about today. The key things that are going to be, number one, GDP report was out today for the United States economy for first quarter of 2023. So I want to talk about that on the national front, but also look at the debt ceiling bill that was passed by the House Republicans. So it's another key thing to think about on the national level. On the state level, I want to talk about a little bit of what's happening in the Texas legislature, along with the Louisiana legislature, where I was at here recently, and a little bit about school choice and state tax revolution, what's going on there. And the last one is a little bit more on some of the things that I've been working on here recently. So let's get right to it. The first thing I do want to say, though, is if you missed the Let People Prosper show, which comes out on Tuesdays, if you missed that this week, it's a great episode with Dr. Dan Mitchell. We talked a lot about spending limits, the Federal Reserve, and a number of other issues that I hope you'll go back and check it out. It's called Limit Government Spending, and it's episode 41. So please check that out on my YouTube page or other places where you can find your podcast, your favorite place that you go, your platform that you like to go. So with that, let me get straight to it. So GDP, gross domestic product, the measure of economic output for the entire economy. It's measured based on a Keynesian sort of equation where they look at consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. There's also other ways they look at it when you look on the income side. But really focusing in on that, which is often what's most reported, GDP growth on an annualized basis, meaning that if it grew at that rate for 4 quarters over a year, right, instead of just that one quarter, what would the growth rate have been? And they reported that it was 1.1%. So not much. We would like to see growth of 3 to 4%, which is about the average of the last 50 years. It has been slowing down over the last couple of decades, but we need to start having faster growth to help with some of our deficit issues, to help with more jobs and well-paid jobs and things of that nature across the economy. And so I think this was a very weak GDP number. It goes along with the weak GDP that we had from Q4 2021 to Q4 2022. That was only a growth rate of 0.9%, the slowest on record over any year that was during a recession, because usually you have declining real GDP, right? So this is inflation-adjusted dollars, and that was only 0.9%. Now it's only 1.1% here in the first quarter, so not a good situation overall. When you look at some of the other measures that are out there, and this was right in line actually with the Federal Reserve. The Atlanta Fed puts out what's called GDP Now. It's an estimate based on a number of market indicators or economic indicators of what GDP will be within that quarter. And they said it was going to be 1.1%. It was right on. It was right below the blue chip, which is a number of companies that look at this. Blue chip consensus was 1.5%. So it was a little bit below that. So, but again, this is just a weak economic indicator overall, or economic indication of the economy is slowing a lot, right? Slower economic growth. Inflation was above expectations of 3.7% up to 4.2%. So we're still running in the 4% to 5% inflationary pressures across the economy. Also not a good sign. I think that's going to mean that the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates at its upcoming meeting, the Federal Open Market Committee meeting, from 4.75% to 5%, the current range that it's in, to 25 basis points for each one of those. So it'll be at a range of 5.25 or 5 to 5.25, however you want to look at it. But in other words, we're going to still keep seeing higher interest rates, but we really need to see the balance sheet continue to come down. I know I've talked about that, but we need to see the balance sheet come down quite considerably before we're going to get a handle of inflation. And yes, that does mean that they're going to have a very difficult time to get what's called a soft landing or not a recession, as I do think that there will be a deep recession. But that's because we were propped up for so long. This is just the ramifications for that action. You can't have the boom without the eventual bust when it's not based on market-based measures like the free market capitalism that provides the best path to prosperity, instead of these more socialistic manners of providing prop-ups from government spending, money printing and everything else. And look, if the GDP number was even worse, if you think about just the private economy, which is the productive sector of the economy that employs the most people. So what you do is you exclude government spending and what's called investment, quote unquote investment, which in my view, the government can invest. It's using other people's money. It's just spending other people's money. So it's not investing in the sense of you and I going out and investing in something and get a rate of return, or a business, right, getting a rate of return. It's not the same. And so you exclude government spending, which contributed 0.8% to that 1.1%. 1.1% minus 0.8%. only 0.3% growth in the productive private sector. That's just anemic. That's just not much growth at all. And so again, this provides more concern about the state of the economy, how weak that it is right now, and everything else. And look, I mean, you've got President Biden, who earlier this week announced re-election. I think he's going to have a difficult time making his case to the people, American people, saying, look, you need to hire me again. You need to be reelected. He talked about finishing the job. I'm not sure what the job is that he's trying to finish, other than I guess continue to kick people while they're down, because so many people have been, losing their real purchasing power is down. Inflation adjusted wages or average weekly earnings are down for 24 straight months. This is not a good situation. And so this again puts more concern about the economy and the progressive failed policies of the Biden administration, which I guess they're just going to double down on. So the Republicans have really got to come through with some good pro-growth policies of looking at tax cuts, cutting government spending. That is also pro-growth. Let's not forget that. Cutting regulations that have been put in place by the Biden administration to really allow for flourishing, so people have more money in their pockets. That's going to be important. And by the way, Republicans did, I think, something pretty good here recently. They passed the debt ceiling bill out of the House Republicans, right, who have the majority now in the House. And this bill basically makes it to where they return spending to 2022 levels. I would like to see it actually went to 2019 levels, but I know that's more difficult given the politics at hand. But that is a good step. All right, compared to the 2023 levels. So that is less spending than what we are now. And it would limit the growth of spending over the next decade by 1%. Now, that could be changed later on, but at least there is a trajectory of less government spending overall. It also gets rid of a lot of the tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act, which I recently testified before the House Ways and Means Committee, of the extraordinary costs that are much more than the estimates by the CBO. So I think that was another good measure there. They're also removing a lot of these, the $80 billion for increased IRS agents. That's not what we need across the economy. Instead, we need to be making the tax system more simple, not more complicated, and not more tax people coming after us and checking us and auditing us in the process. That's not how we get to more growth and prosperity. That's actually a path to the road to serfdom, having less economic growth and prosperity in the process, and having to look over our shoulder, wondering what the government's going to do next. And so I think this is some good measures of what the Republicans did here. The Senate will likely not pass it, right, as the Democrats have control over the Senate, but it'll be interesting to see what happens, because if not, we could get to the debt ceiling sort of quote unquote a crisis. And by July is what Treasury is telling us. So something's going to need to be done. We're already seeing credit spreads start to rise dramatically, meaning interest rate spreads are going up a lot as people are fearful that we may not be able to pay our debt. And so that's something that will need to be looked at soon. So I'll put some notes there. When you look at the Texas legislative session, look, I think that we're winding down to the last days, as I think there's less than 40 days left now in the session. I still think that they're spending too much, both the Senate and the House. They both passed their budgets, so now they're in conference committee. I'm hopeful, if you're listening, that the conference committee will find ways to bring down the amount of spending, cut some of this bloat that's in the system, putting so much money into X, Y, and Z. Let's get rid of that. Let's make sure that there's not any money going towards, tax breaks or subsidies for businesses or natural gas plants, trying to prop up what they're doing. This is not the role for government. We shouldn't be doing that. There's also House Bill 5, which is trying to bring back a property tax abatement, economic development deals by local governments, by school districts in particular, that should also fail. That's not a role for government either, in my view. And look, the big three things I think the legislature should do, just like in every state: spend less, tax less. Property tax relief is the big one in Texas. They currently don't have enough for historic record property tax, so they've got to do something there to really boost it up to about $20 billion. And the big thing too is providing universal school choice. There's Senate Bill 8 that is moving through. It's been heard in the House Education Committee. Let's beef that one up. Let's make sure that it's universal, because other states are already doing this. Louisiana, where I was at this week, meeting with legislators and everything, they're also providing some good opportunities for responsible budgeting, which I released the Responsible Louisiana Budget with the Pelican Institute. They're looking at tax relief of hitting triggers. They would provide tax relief for personal income taxes, also their corporate franchise tax. And they even passed a universal school choice bill out of their House Education Committee, which is now going to the Appropriations Committee. So look, Louisiana's doing it. North Carolina looks like they're about to do it with veto-proof votes in both the Senate and the House, because it looks like the governor wants to veto it. South Carolina looks like they may be next. So there's a number of states that are adding to the 6 2 last year, 4 already this year, that could be universal. Oklahoma is another state. So this is a school choice revolution that needs to happen. But we also need the flat tax revolution and the responsible budgeting revolution. So I'm hopeful that Texas can really turn things around and stop focusing so much on woke issues and expanding Medicaid for different people and different parts of the population. Texas has been one of the 10 states that has rightly not expanded Medicaid in the Obamacare sense, but they're taking measures that could expand it in other ways, putting more cost on taxpayers, when instead the goal should be to get people off of Medicaid, get off of safety nets, to have a more prosperous economy instead of incentivizing people to be on the programs and expanding it to other people. That's just not the direction that should be going there. And so I'm hopeful that there will be some interest in that as we move forward. The responsible Louisiana budget, the top number there is $21.4 billion in state funds. So that's something else to be able to consider there in Louisiana. A lot of other states should be looking at no more growth and population growth plus inflation, right? That's the best measure for the average, that best relates to the average taxpayer's ability to pay for government spending, which is what we care about. And so let's make sure to look at that. There's also a lot of bills on social media, banning social media, restricting access, setting curfews for minors. I think this is a bad direction overall. I think that government should not be in control of what we're telling our kids and what we're doing with our kids. Ultimately, we should be empowering parents, not government bureaucrats and politicians, with these sorts of bill like House Bill 18 in Texas and others that are in Louisiana and other states that are trying to follow this Utah model of a top-down approach. We need liberty. We need more information by government to provide what's going on and get to the root causes of some of the issues of stress and suicides and things that are going on. But I just don't think that banning things is the right way to go. Liberty, free markets, that's the way to do it. And I think that's best for parents. We should be empowering parents to do what's best for their kids. And so I think that's another important part here that I've been writing about recently. And then look, school choice, going back to Adam Smith, people are overlooking the fact that the supply will also increase, okay? When you look at Adam Smith, he said in The Wealth of Nations in 1776, the division of labor was limited by the extent of the market. We have to understand that the extent of the market is not limited. It's limited right now in the status quo monopoly government-run system, right? But when you have competition through school choice, we're going to see new suppliers of education services pop up in schools and everything else because the extent of the market is now changing. We have competition. And so that is something we've got to make sure that we're focused on, whether we're looking at school choice or other issues that are happening at the end of the day. And so, look, when we look at the national side of things, the economy is weak. I'm glad to see Republicans have passed this debt ceiling deal. I'd like to see more cuts. Let's keep pushing in that direction. And we look at the states, Texas has got to make sure they stop focusing so much on woke nonsense and instead focus on economic prosperity. Places like Louisiana have also got to do the same, responsible Louisiana budget. And states have really got to stop focusing so much on banning things like on social media and trying to lock people up and instead focus on liberty and free markets. And then that's the best way to prosper. As you know, let people prosper is what I like to talk about very often. So again, thanks for joining me on this week's economy. Please share with your family and friends. And until next time, have a prosperous day.